Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany. Today we are wrapping up the month of March and talking about the books that I read for the second half of March. I did do a mid-month wrap-up, which was good because I read like 13 books in the first half of the month, and I still am not sure how I did that, even though a lot of them were middle grade. So that really helps because you knock a lot more out. But the second half of the month, I still read quite a few middle grade books and only read 7 books. So I read 2 YA, 4 middle grade, and then 1 adult spiritual nonfiction book. So I'll talk about each of those. But overall, I feel like March, despite the fact that I ended with reading 20 books, which is crazy, it was really kind of a mediocre reading month. I only had 2 5-stars for the entire month. The first half of the month, the 5-star was Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick, and that book is like half pictures, so it was a really short read, but it was really beautifully done. And then the 5-star for this half of the month was Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly. I don't have a physical copy of this book because I read it on Kindle, but this book is a Cinderella retelling, and instead of it being primarily about Cinderella, it's about the ugly stepsisters. In particular, one of them named Isabel. So the beginning of this book opens at kind of the end of the Cinderella fairy tale. If you haven't read the original Cinderella fairy tale, you might not know that when the prince goes around to try the slippers on all the maidens of the kingdom to try to find Cinderella, he tries to try it on the stepsisters first. The stepsisters' feet don't fit, so they actually cut off parts of their feet to make their feet fit, which is kind of gruesome, so that's how the story opens. But this book, I was really surprised by this book. I love fairy tale retellings, and that's something I have recently discovered, is just how much I absolutely adore them. But I wasn't prepared to love this one as much as I did. It went so much deeper than a fairy tale. So in addition to following the stepsisters, we are also following the fates from like Greek mythology, and then chance is like personified in a man. And the two of them are fighting over the stepsister, Isabel. One saying, you know, the fate saying she has to follow the path that they've mapped out for her, and chance trying to help her break free of what would be her fate. So there's a great message there about not having to be who you've always been and what society has made you, because it really delves into why the stepsisters are the way that they are, why they treated Ella the way that they did. It's about so much more than just like them getting their comeuppance, but it's a really good social commentary on how society prizes beauty over intelligence in women. So girls who are beautiful are much more valued than girls who are interested in math or science, and so that was a really huge part of the story. Then, you know, the criticism that is given to the sisters, just the realization that in order for words to affect you, you have to be a willing participant. It reminds me of that quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I felt like that was another big lesson in this book, and also just a really powerful and beautiful message about love and forgiveness. So overall, this book was really, really good, and so much more than just a fun fairy tale. I felt like it had a lot of really beautiful messages in it. There's a lot of breaking the fourth wall kind of deal where, you know, the writer is talking to the reader, and I feel like some people don't like that. They feel like it becomes too preachy or too awkward, and that, you know, you're not leaving up to the reader to make these discoveries on their own of what this story is trying to convey. But I didn't feel that way. I actually really liked it. So just go into it knowing that if you're someone where that drives you nuts, you probably won't like elements of this book. Okay, the other YA book that I read this month was Kiss of Deception, which is the first book in the Remnant Chronicles. And when I said I was going to read this, for my March TBR. A lot of you were really excited because you really loved this book, and it was one of your favorite fantasy series. And I didn't love it. So I'm really sorry. I ended up rating it 3 stars because like I didn't really enjoy it, but I actually felt like it was really well written. I just felt like it wasn't particularly my kind of style of story. It's a story of this girl. Her name is Leah, and she's a princess, and she's going to be forced to marry a prince from another kingdom to build an alliance. And basically she's like, no, I'm not doing that. And she just leaves and runs away. And then there are 2 guys that are part of the story too, Caden and Rafe. And one of them is the prince from the kingdom that she was supposed to marry, and one of them is an assassin sent from a totally different kingdom to kill her. So there's like this mystery going on of who's who. There's this like major love triangle. And that I feel like that's what I didn't like, is that the book had a lot of romance in it. And I think I really would have loved this book when I was younger. I've been pretty clear with the fact that I am really picky when it comes to romance in books. I just am. But when I was younger, like older teen, younger adult, I would have absolutely loved this book. I loved the friendship between Leah and like her lady in waiting. They run away together, and her lady in waiting just is really just her best friend and is no longer serving her. They're on like totally equal playing fields, and I just loved the relationship between the 2 of them. I loved how much the author just built up the kingdoms and towns here. Like, I feel like she really did a good job of establishing some of the religious elements and some of the day-to-day life and all those kinds of things. I feel like she did a really good job in that. I don't know. I think the romance was, I'm just not a huge love triangle person just in general. So I think that had something to do with it. And also like that was a primary plot point until about probably a little over halfway through the book. And then we kind of started taking a detour, and there started being action and things started happening. And then I started liking the book a little bit better, but it just wasn't my favorite. I don't think I will continue with the series. I did listen to it on audiobook, which I really enjoyed and would recommend that, because there are different narrators for different chapters, because you've got the point of view of Leah and Caden and Rafe, and so I really liked that there was different narrators for that. So for middle grade March, when I hit the middle of the month, I still had several books that I needed to finish to be able to finish my prompts for the month. And I did end up reading them, but I took a massive detour by reading more books of Keepers of the Lost City because I just really wanted to read it, and it was actually really hard for me to not just go ahead and read more. So I read book 3 as part of the Hey Readathon at the beginning of March, and then I also read Never Seen, which is book 4, and Lodestar, which is book 5. So it's really hard for me to not just like read book 6 right now. So we'll see. I may end up reading that in April. But I really enjoyed these books. I loved Everblaze, which I mentioned before. It was probably my favorite book in the series so far. Never Seen, I struggled with a lot. There were a lot of things that just didn't make sense to me. And just issues that I had with some of the other magical races, I guess you would say, that are in this. So, you know, there's elves, there's goblins, there's trolls, there's dwarves, there's ogres, you know, there's different magical races. And this just has a lot with kind of like, I don't know, like the elves' superior attitude, feeling like they're the best race and all this stuff. And I don't know, so I kind of just felt like that was kind of like a little side eye. And there was just, yeah, there were some plot issues with it. If you want to talk spoilers about this, I will link my Goodreads review for this because I really went into it in that one. I didn't really have as many issues with Lodestar. I think there are things in it that you kind of had to suspend your disbelief because like it just kind of was like didn't make sense how they did certain things. But I really like the world, and I like the storyline, and I love Keith. I really love Keith. I feel like some of the characters in here are kind of like flat and boring, but Keith has like become this really complex character where he's just trying to deal with childhood trauma and deal with like who he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to do with that, family over friends dynamic, like just all these just different things that I just really appreciated Keith's character and his character development in it. And so if for no other reason, I want to keep reading for Keith. He's my favorite character. I just love him so very much. Okay, so my other prompts for middle grade March that I needed to fulfill was a book that was published in the decade that I was born. So for that book, I had The Sign of the Beaver. This book I actually, my family and I listened to on a road trip. So I went into this a little bit hesitant. So the storyline is there's this boy, Matt. It takes place in the 1700s, like I think shortly before the Revolutionary War. So Matt and his father travel from Massachusetts to Maine to build a home. They want to like pioneer and homestead up in the wilderness in Maine. So his father and him, they build this cabin, and then his father leaves to go get his mother and his sister. While Matt is there, he then encounters some Native Americans. So I was kind of a little bit wary, you know, like I didn't know a book written in the 80s how they were kind of going to handle all of that. And there were some issues. There were some things in it that I felt were glossed over and not handled wonderfully, but I felt like for its time, it was kind of actually progressive in its views. There's a whole dynamic where Matt is asked by, I guess, essentially the chief to teach his grandson how to read and write English because the Native Americans haven't been able to read the treaties. So they've signed these treaties that the colonists have given them, and then didn't realize that basically they were signing away their land or they were signing away things. So so that was really addressed, you know, how demonized the Native Americans were when actually they were wonderful in a lot of ways, and there was just a lot of things that were misunderstandings, particularly because there's a language barrier. And then just like, you know, that they were there first and we took their land from them. And so like a lot of those things are addressed. In addition, Matt is reading Robinson Crusoe to the Native American boy, and I haven't read Robinson Crusoe, but I guess there's a scene where one of the natives basically swears to be Robinson Crusoe's slave. And so that's actually addressed in here, where the Native American is like, no, like no native would do that, and he doesn't get to be master just because he's a white man. And Matt's just like, I never thought about that. So there's just this whole interesting thing of having your worldview challenged, things that you always thought were normal and good, realizing like, oh, maybe that's not how things really are. So I really appreciated that this book did that. Like I said, there were elements in it that were not handled perfectly, but overall I really appreciated what this book did, because I felt like it was a really good examination on how the colonists' behaviors affected the Native Americans. The next prompt that I needed to fulfill was a book that had family or found family elements, and so I read A Night Divided by Jennifer Nielsen. This book is about a girl who she's living in Berlin, and the Berlin Wall literally goes up overnight, and her father and her brother had traveled to the other side of Berlin, and so now their family is separated, and she's stuck on one side with her brother and her mother, and then her other brother and her father are on the other side. And so this is basically a tale of them trying to escape from one side of Berlin into the other to be with their family, from the communist side and into the side that just has more freedom. And I haven't really done a lot of research into that time period, and I don't know that I've seen a historical fiction book that explores that time period. So I thought that that was really cool and unique. So I really did enjoy this book, but in the same respect, I kind of didn't. I had trouble connecting to the main character, basically, is my issue. I don't know why. I feel like it was probably just me because everyone really loves this book, and I did enjoy it. I still gave it 4 stars. I liked it a lot. But, yeah, I don't know. There was something about it that I just kind of had trouble connecting with her as a character, and I didn't really have much of an emotional response to it like I was expecting to. But I still gave it 4 stars because I still felt like it was well written. I feel like it was more me than it was the book. So the last book for Middle Grade March was it had a silhouette on the cover, so I read this book, which is Angel and Bavar, and it's got a little silhouette of a girl on the cover. So this is supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling. But it's not really. It's weird. So it's about this girl, human girl Angel, and then this boy Bavar, who is like, I guess he's some sort of monster or whatever, but people aren't able to recognize him as such. But she does. She can see him for who he really is. Which really startles and alarms him. And there's like these creatures who he has magic and he's trying to keep them from out of the human world because they want to like destroy the humans, and somehow those creatures like killed Angel's parents. And I don't know, it was really convoluted and really strange. And I usually like fairy tale retellings, but this one I really struggled with, and the writing style was really choppy and weird, and I don't know. There was a lot of strange elements to this book that I didn't like, and I had a really hard time connecting with the writing style. And normally I can kind of just be like, well, it's a middle grade book and that's why it's not as deep or whatever. But this was just weird. I just really didn't love it. And the last book that I read in the month of March was When the Darkness Will Not Lift by John Piper. I recently hauled this book in a book haul video and actually said that I couldn't wait to read it, and I read it right after that video. So it's a really thin book. I think it's got like 70 or 80 pages in it, so it's very short, and the print is humongous, so it's a really short read. So this book is written for Christians who are struggling with depression, and I have a history of really struggling with depression, and just, I guess, to be honest, the past few months have been particularly hard for me, so I was really looking forward to reading this book. I feel like this book did a really good job of examining depression, which John Piper had struggled with a lot of depression before he wrote this book. So this is not coming from a place of like outside looking in. This is like he's been there and he has experienced this. So I felt like that was really helpful. There's a lot of compassion in this book, but also a lot of practical advice. So he doesn't knock medication at all in any way, and actually says, you know, you might need medication. Don't feel like you shouldn't talk to your doctor about this or whatever. But he also said that, you know, to just medicate the issue of depression without ever examining if there's some spiritual element to it as well, you're not going to get the freedom from it that you want from only using medication. So I liked that balanced approach to that there's no shame in medication, and medication is necessary for a lot of people, but there can be more to it than just that. I found myself kind of wishing that this book was a little more in depth, but it's really short, so that's pretty much why. But in the introduction he said there's another book that he wrote, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's like When I Don't Desire God or something like that. And he said that this book was actually like him expounding upon one of the chapters in that book. So I might be interested in reading that book. But the thing that I really did love about this book being so short and the chapters being really short is that it's not very intimidating. So if you were in a place where you were like really extremely depressed and you're really struggling to even get out of bed, a book like this is not very intimidating to try to have the mental capacity to read. So I thought that that was really good. I also love the fact that the last chapter is actually about helping people that you love who are struggling with depression, and I thought that that was really helpful and really wonderful, and it's encouraging people to not give up and that it's worth the emotional investment. It was really encouraging. It was a really good book. I enjoyed it. I only gave it 4 stars because I found that some of the book, I just wish that it had gone deeper and had more information. So, yeah, I just wanted a little bit more from it than I ended up getting. So those are the 7 books that I read for the second half of the month. So I read a lot of the books that were on my TBR for March, but there's a few that I didn't get to. Like, I did not read the group read for middle grade March, The Brave. I think I read a couple chapters in it and just had trouble getting into it, and then just didn't end up getting back to it. And then I didn't read the Romanov sisters either. I had to go back to the library before I got to it. And then I did start The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky, but because I was trying so hard to finish all my middle grade March books, I didn't get very far in it. I think I'm only like 70 pages in or something like that. So this is carrying over into my April TBR, which I kind of knew was gonna happen. So I'm still going to read this one, but I didn't finish it. So overall, like, I read a lot of books in March, but it kind of felt like a meh reading month. I don't know, I'm hoping that I read some more excellent books in April than I did in March, but I'm glad that I had a couple of 5 stars and a couple of 4 stars. So I would love to hear from you. What are some great books that you have been reading lately? And also, like, if you have read any of the books that I read, what were your thoughts? Were they the same as mine or different than mine? I'm pretty sure a lot of you had different opinions than I did on Kiss of Deception, so I'm sorry, but that's okay. We can all like different books. That's why there's so many different kinds of books. It's okay. It's all okay. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe, and I will see you again next time.